Hello, and welcome back to Story Impact. I'm your host, Lisa Tolles. This series is intended to lift authors up, give them visibility into the book buying market, and to give them a voice and a presence to help readers connect with them, their vision, and their stories. But this series is really about the story behind the stories, the creators, about what their process looks like, where they get their inspiration, and then the purpose that drives them book after book. I want to know what brings these people back to the keyboard and that empty page day after day. As well as being your host for this series, I'm also a crime novelist, and you can find my books on Amazon and on lisatolles.com. All right, let me tell you about our guest today. My friend, author Ben Bradley, is a mystery author whose work explores the darker corners of human nature with nuance and heart. It really does. He's a member of Mystery Writers of America, International Thriller Writers, and his latest novel, What He Left Behind, has been praised as atmospheric and gripping. He also penned the Shepard and Kelly mystery series, published by Indies United Publishing, and his short fiction has appeared in lots of literary magazines, including Rec and Review and Flash Fiction magazine. In addition to writing, Bradley works in public health and homelessness. He lives in Raleigh, North Carolina, with his dog, his wife, a new baby, and a cat, Fox. Ben, warmest welcome.
Thanks for having me, Lisa. It's good to see you.
You too. All right, so can you give us a little synopsis of your latest book and what this is all about?
Absolutely. So, What He Left Behind is a small town mystery where a detective who she has spent her entire life living in this small town in the mountains of North Carolina uh, is called to a scene late one night and discovers that there is a dead body in town. Cue the dun dun dun. And in doing so, learns that her first love, who left town abruptly many years ago, is suddenly back in town, and they soon are tasked to work together to try and solve not only the identity of the victim, but also who the perpetrator was, while trying to unpack their past and life in a small town.
Love it. I love the premise. I'm watching Virgin River right now, which is all about small town life and like how there you just can't hide in a small town. And I think that's a nuance that as a reader brings me back time after time, because you can see not just the individual characters, but their interconnectivity, I mean, like how they relate to each other, how they hide from each other. And yeah, that small town kind of nuance is a really important, almost like a character in and of itself.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I really like that everyone has history. In some small way, you're connected or you know them through some, you went to maybe had an English class with them back in the day or sat beside them in church. And I thought that just provided a really cool setting for a story like this.
Hmm. And does it take place in a real town or a fictional town?
No, it's a fictional town. I, in the past, have written about some real towns, and let's just say some reviewers have been very harsh in their criticism of street names or directions. But more than that, I really wanted to kind of combine my experience in a lot of small towns in North Carolina into one town that kind of has the quirks and the fun parts of all the other ones.
Mm-hmm. So I want to ask you some questions about your previous series too, but and that series, I believe those books took place in Cape Cod, Massachusetts, and I'm from Massachusetts too. So how does the small town in your latest book compared to that region, to like Cape Cod, Massachusetts, a coastal town, and what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think a small town in, Western North Carolina has a little bit of a different makeup than a town in Cape Cod does. Cape Cod's really fascinating in that there are locals and then there are just a flood of individuals that come up every summer when the weather gets nice. In Western North Carolina, you kind of have a little bit of a mix where folks come out to the mountains a lot, but some of these small towns don't see a lot of tourists or anything like that. I think the other is just kind of the diversity in opinion and in political views as well. So, you know, North Carolina as a state is really interesting and just that it has these different pockets of different beliefs, and that can just make for a really fascinating type of town. And
Hmm.
then I think the key here is that Cape Cod's a great setting for you have the beach right there, and that's full of intrigue in its own way. And then Oak Hill, the town, the fictional town that this takes place in, is actually right besides the Nantahala Mountains, which is just a different atmosphere, different natural setting in a lot of ways.
Mm. So thinking about Raleigh and Oak Hill and thinking about your police procedural novels, I'm curious what you think about crime in a small town as opposed to like crime in a big city. I mean like the law enforcement kind of presence or mechanism is like, like extended and complex and department agency like relationships to solve crimes. And in a small town, especially like in like a one horse town, like the elements of crime investigation are very different.
Yeah, I think that's one of the fun parts of choosing the setting for a novel too, is I have some idea of what the police presence might be in a city like Raleigh, but in a small town, it's like you said, it's a little more based on hunches and where maybe you have some individuals where you know their identity. And I think that rings true in this book as well, where, Grace, the main character, everyone that she's talking to in town, she has some experience with. So she has some
Mm,
identity that she identifies them as good or bad or neutral or complicated in that way. And I think like a lot of other communities, there are bad apples where you kind of always think, oh, it's probably that person, like it could be behind it. And then you also have people that have always been kind of stand-up citizens or really good community members. And I think it's fun to think about what happens when some of that gets flipped on its head.
hmm And also what happens to people's stories and their alibis and how they communicate about a crime when things really start kind of heating up and getting intense. I mean, like
Yeah.
human behavior is just so fascinating. The constructs that we create to obfuscate what we don't want to share with the world.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's the kind of thing where a theme that I talk about a lot in the last couple of weeks, especially, has been just small town, big secrets kind of thing. Um, I
Mm-hmm.
think it speaks well where there's always everyone has skeletons in their closet, but in a small community, they tend to come out quicker.
Mm-hmm. Um, how would you compare Grace and Sawyer to Kelly and Shepard? So Kelly and Shepard that was the investigation duo in your previous series, and now you're kind of launching something new. Or are there any commonalities there?
Yeah, I think in a little bit of a way, it's a an odd couple situation, which is always fun. I think that actually in both of the settings, the female partner has the police kind of presence in a way, which is interesting that I haven't even thought about. Um, but I think in general, it's just about their willingness to work together, and unlike Shepard and Kelly, where they kind of end up working together through a case, Grace and Sawyer have a pretty long history where they grew up together and spent a lot of time as kids playing in the woods, and they're just old friends. And I think that provides just a different level of communication and a different level of kind of trust that comes in that. And but it also makes things a lot more layered and complex, where the Shepard and Kelly it's a little more lighthearted, a little more fun, cozy in a way. And then I think the goal with What He Left Behind is really to think about this with a little more depth and a little more character driven story.
Mm. We just had an earthquake, by the way. I don't know if you saw my eyes get wide
Oh
and
no! Oh geez!
ripped the desk. Oh my God.
Wow!
Hashtag life in California. It was a small,
Yeah.
but oh my God, that was fun.
Whoa.
I was trying to just be cool, but but, uh,
I'm
uh,
glad you're okay.
yeah, I'm okay. I always walk around the house and I look for cracks like coming down from the ceiling and or pictures that are like a little bit like this, and so I'll post
Yeah.
that later. But no, I'm fine.
Wow.
Um, so in this latest book, What He Left Behind, I felt this even more than some of your other novels. That a crime is kind of like, sort of like a mountain and like here's the water line, and you're only showing just what's on the top. But as you kind of like, you talked about, kind of layered complexity as you start learning more about these characters, it's not just one body in the small town. It's like all the things that it's connected to. How do you handle that as an author? Because I know as a reader, a lot of times I think, how did they do that? This is really complex. I mean, do you have like, pie charts and whiteboards and like diagrams, or do you do like an outline or seat of your pants? What's your process like when you're building that out?
It's a great question. And I'm always curious what other people do as well, because I think everyone likes other people's process better than their own. Um, for this one, I it really started on sticky notes in a way. Really like broad strokes of what I there's dual timelines in the book, and so I wanted to make sure that kind of everything lined up in a way where it made sense. But yeah, it was really moving kind of sticky notes around to understand where certain things need to come out in the story and what needs to be kind of held. Um, but I will say, like, one of the challenges in writing it was a key decision that I think authors, especially crime fiction authors, have to face is kind of what happens on the page versus off the page.
Mm,
And in my first draft, everything was on the page. It was long, it was wordy, and it eventually working with the editor at the publisher was able to really understand kind of what was crucial to be told in that vein, and then also what could happen kind of being told to somebody in a way. And that was fun to learn.
mm. So you're learning things from your characters, and
Yeah,
I feel like my characters teach me things too. Mostly how they teach me that I don't know what I'm doing, but but through them I learn I learn kind of just each book is different,
absolutely. Yeah.
So do you have a copy of What He Left Behind, and would you like to read a little passage from it, or how would you feel about my reading a little bit just from the very beginning?
Yeah, go for it.
This is from chapter 1. Gray drizzle clung to my raincoat as I pressed myself against the centuries-old door to Oak Hill Grocery and said a silent prayer to no one. The scripture on the dimly lit sign out front opined about the valley of death, a threat or a promise, I wasn't sure. Pushing inside, I navigated the cramped aisles and let raindrops tumble from my shoulders onto the scuffed linoleum floor. When I'd assembled enough for a hearty dinner, I moved toward the counter where Margot Locklear, the biggest gossip in all of Oak Hill, North Carolina, waited with a frown. So you set up so much there, I mean, like that really sets up kind of like small town life and kind of like a dreary atmosphere. And I have the sense that like someone's there who like doesn't really want to be there. And I think, that's just a very short opening, but it's very captivating in a way because like now I'm like, oh, who are these people? What is he doing there? It's like making me move forward, and that's what you want to do.
Well, thanks. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I will say the opening chapters took a lot of work and polish and time, but yeah, I think, even in that, the few lines that you read, there's just little things that I wanted to have in the story. Like one of you mentioned in the intro that I've spent a lot of time working in homelessness around the country. And I really started in that work in North Carolina, spending a lot of time in little towns all around the state. And that was one of the really fascinating things was you mentioned in that line about kind of scripture on the grocery store sign and kind of all that. And
Hmm.
I think those are like the little details that feel really true to me, in my experience of walking around that, where, um, it, it just kind of it rings a little bit more true where there is a grocery store and there is a grocery store sign and there's the kind of mixed boundaries and all that. So yeah, it was fun to kind of set it all up.
Mm. Um, Do you feel like talking about your work at all? I mean, I've read about the work that you do in the world, the AmeriCorps program that you've been a part of, and I suspect that's very purpose-driven, kind of emotionally driven work. And I'm curious because I think readers want to know about you as an author. That's really the whole purpose of this series. But I'm curious how that work and how your human connections inspire the characters that you create.
Yeah, no, it definitely does. Yeah, so I kind of years ago spent a couple years in an AmeriCorps program that's a national service program that unfortunately right now is facing a lot of budget cuts, which is really unfortunate. But that work was transformative in really helping me understand the kind of diversity of the country. I spent time in rural Kansas, inner city Houston, on the Navajo Nation. And all of the experiences were just so transformative in understanding. Um, I think the universality of story is really true. And that is that every person that I worked with or met around the country had these fascinating stories of how they ended up where they are, or why they're working in housing, or why they're working in, food security. Um, and I have continued to build on that in years past, where right now really work to provide healthcare to individuals that are experiencing homelessness. And in any of that work, you really get to see that everyone's story of how they got to where they are at the moment is just it's fascinating, and like it should be a book in itself. And
Hmm.
I think that's one of the key things is that in this book and in others, I think it's just value that everyone has a story to tell, and everyone's story is really valuable, but also that a story is a really powerful way to escape the challenges of work like that. I use writing often as a way to kind of decompress from a stressful job or a stressful day. And
Mm,
uh, whether I want to or not, my day work absolutely shows up in the writing. In What He Left Behind, there is an integral character that runs a homeless shelter as well. And so
mm,
that like I just feel like it's important to include, especially in small town America.
mm. Do the individuals and families that you work with know that you're an author? Know that you're a storyteller?
And no, in fact, until a couple of weeks ago, my coworkers didn't even know. A well-kept secret, kind of a secret identity, but the word got out, and they were really supportive of this last book launch too, which was really cool to see coworkers, sending me pictures of their copy, like
Oh,
so very cool.
that makes all the difference. I mean, that encouragement, encouragement from other writers just feels so good to your heart because they understand like the challenges of the journey, but especially getting encouragement from coworkers, that means so much. I've been lucky to have that too at my recent job. But like you, I kind of I kept it separate, you know. I mean, like, yeah, I'm a full-time writer and I work full-time in the tech industry, and like I don't do writing during the workday, and
Yeah.
I would never have like a book event during the workday, and it's just something that I do on the fringes of my life. It just so happens that those fringes make up like a full-time job. So I don't know how to reconcile that, but yeah. How do you how do you kind of segment those things out in your life? Because you work, you write, you have a baby now.
Yeah.
When do you sleep? Never?
No, whenever the baby sleeps is what they say, right?
Mhm.
I I've been, I also have a very supportive partner, and I think that I've been lucky to find pockets in the day I often will write in the morning before I start my job. I work remotely, which is nice, so have an easy transition into that day. And with a baby, there have absolutely been 2 a.m. writing sessions because I'm up anyway, or editing with a baby in one arm.
Mm,
And I think that's like the beauty of it is I when I first started writing, I felt a ton of urgency to just get every single story out into the world and like, oh, it's also crucial and important, and it still is. But I think that I've also taken much more of a long-term mindset where, these things take time and there's life to be had in the meantime. And so trying to really channel that more and more. But yeah, it's a fun way to blend things.
mm-hmm. Thinking about you on your writing journey 10 years ago, what would the you now tell the you then that you didn't know back then?
That's a great question. Um, with this book through the publisher, it's the first time that I've walked into Barnes and Noble and bookstores and seen my book on shelves. And yeah, I think as writers know, it's a little hard to comprehend, but it is a truly special feeling and a little bewildering at the same time. Um, but yeah, like I went on release day and went with my brother and got to see it, and it was just like, whoa, that's crazy to see. And I think that in a weird way would be really difficult for me to believe 10 years ago. And that might just speak to the journey itself, which is that, there are just so many valleys, but the peaks come too. And more than even 10 years ago, I would like to tell myself 2 years ago that like keep going, keep working, it's going to be okay. Because I think it can be very lonely and isolating, especially in kind of query and all that space, which
Yeah.
was really my first step into that world. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Tell us about how you connected with your publisher because you and I met through Indies United Publishing and they published your previous series and now this new series is published by CapCut Books, right?
Camcat, yeah.
I'm sorry, Camcat Books. Yeah. So how did you connect with them? Was it just kind of like the typical process of finding an agent and then getting an agent and they shopped it to a publisher, or did you know someone along the way? How did that happen?
No, kind of yeah, a little bit of the typical process. I mean, I spent probably at least 12, maybe 18 months querying. So that was challenging and definitely a ton of rejection. In that process, I had a few agents that reached out with what they call like an R&R, a revise and resubmit. So they gave some feedback that they might want to see and then have you submit it back to them.
Hmm.
Um, it's a long story, but a few of them that ended up not working out. One ended up leaving the business altogether, and so it felt like every hurdle that I could have seen was getting thrown at me. But yeah, in the end, really, I'd say this without exaggeration, like right as I was about to give up, in the kind of the querying space, is when I got connected to Camcat, and um, they were just great from start to finish. They've gone through a lot of transitions themselves. The founder of the organization passed away last year, and so they've had to kind of reshuffle things a bit. But they're truly a great artist first organization, and I was really looking. Indies United had been great to me, and I was really curious to see if I could take things up a step and to get that national, international distribution that comes with the bigger publishers. And that's what Camcat really delivered on. And so, yeah, it's been a wild ride.
Awesome. So what he left behind is the start of a new series, is that right? And what's your plan there? Or are you not allowed to talk about that
I'm
at
happy to talk about it. Yeah, I'll be transparent. There is the hope is that it will become a series. There is a second book in the series drafted that is going through some revisions right now, and it'll be ultimately up to the publisher on how to proceed with that. I wouldn't anticipate that happens anytime before 2026, but yeah, it's and then the hope is really to kind of go a couple more in this series and keep exploring it while also writing some other stuff to keep myself kind of. There's always ideas, I know you're the same way, where like there's more ideas than time at the moment, so that's the hard part.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's right. So I wanted to ask for a novice writer who's just getting started and really doesn't know anything about kind of the publishing landscape, what would be your singular piece of advice for them?
Ooh. Uh, I would say two things. One, so not singular. Sorry, I'm cheating. My first would be, and this is kind of obvious, but I think it's important to reiterate, is that writing is a muscle that you just have to keep working on to grow. And yeah, some people write their first draft and it's published and they're a bestseller. Great. That is not common. And it really is something that the more you spend time and kind of commit to just practicing over and over again, that you will get better at writing, you will learn more. And I think that's just really critical. There's nothing that you can do that will put words on the page besides write, and that's just the truth of it. Um, the other thing I would just say is there's so much noise, and that is
Mm,
hard to block out when you're starting. It's hard to block out now, and it will be continuing. There are just thousands of people out there with great intentions that are trying to tell you how they believe a book should be written or how to edit or how to do something. And like, I'm not trying to shortchange the value of all that by any means, but I think it's just you can only take in so much of that at once. And so I think I was really lucky where I didn't spend a lot of time with that early on. And I just wrote, and there are absolutely things that I wish I could go back and revise in some of the early books, but it's also kind of the beauty of it where, there's a value to kind of learning in public like that.
mm. What a great point about noise. I follow a lot of writers on Book Talk, kind of the book element, book and writing element of TikTok, and also Instagram. And I see a lot of younger beginning writers kind of obsessed with the marketing of like where their book's going to end up and writing for a certain market. And I mean, that's not wrong. I admire that they care about that. But I think it can be noise and it can distract from whatever's in here wanting to come out, you know? I mean, like I feel like for my process, permission is the most important thing that I needed. Just giving myself permission to try it and explore and put fingers to the keyboard, even if it's awful, it's okay, you know?
Yeah.
Um, okay, we have a couple minutes left. I just want to ask a couple more questions. What would you say is your singular purpose as an author in terms of what you really want to leave readers with after they finish your books?
I hope it's stories that have kept people entertained, but have also made them think a little bit. And that's kind of the moral question and what he left behind.
Mm. Well, I loved that book and I highly recommend it. You can find Ben's books at benjaminbradleywrites.com. Is that correct? That's
Yep.
your website? Uh-huh. And Ben, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been wonderful to chat with you and learn more about you. I really appreciate it.
Likewise. Always good to see you, Lisa. Thank you so much.
And for those of you tuning in today, thank you so much. Have fun reading What He Left Behind by author Benjamin Bradley, and we will see you next time.